Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another live stream here at Market Beat. It's been quite a wild day in the market, like every day when we do these. This morning's announcement really made the whole market bounce so much. And that is why we have Chris Markoch and Thomas Hughes with us today to help break down all of the moves in the market today. Guys, what a wild morning. That announcement really made the market move so much. And we're finishing with those changes kind of sticking around a little bit. Let's just start off with some of the big swings that we saw today.
Yeah, as most investors expected, any positive trade news from a big country like China would cause tech stocks to rip, and that's what happened this morning. You didn't see like eye-popping gains of over 10% and such, but what's encouraging is that the biggest gainers in the Mag 7, they held their gains on the day. You're seeing Apple closed up nearly 6%. Meta was up around 7.7%. But this was really a broad-based rally throughout the sector.
Yeah, if you look at the if you look at the heat map today, guys, that it's all green everywhere today. So many big changes in the market. Thomas, go over a little bit of what the announcement actually was this morning. What was the actual big news that made all of this green in the heat map today?
Right. I wouldn't even call it actually that big of news. They didn't make that much movement on the trade scenario, but it was a positive development, totally unexpected. Our side, their side had been together talking over the weekend in Switzerland. They came out, both sides citing things like common ground and positive advancements. They've set a framework, which just means they're going to postpone the most restrictive reciprocal tariffs for another 90 days. We still have the 10% base tariff in place. We still have some sector-specific tariffs in place, but those really restrictive reciprocal tariffs have been rolled back for at least 90 days. We're expecting to have some more talks coming up pretty soon. And it's just really a really positive sign for the market that says we're definitely past the peak of tariff fears. The end game is probably going to be a lot less bad than we've been fearing. And importantly, we're going to be getting some certainty, some clarity in the outlook pretty soon. And I think when that happens, it'll allow the analysts to start lifting their price targets. And so we're seeing all of this kind of euphoria playing into today's market move.
Yeah, I think the certainty is another factor that we're seeing all these market moves because we actually have some certainty now, at least for 90 days. We know that this is what's happening, and that's what's helping to get to all of the green in the market. Thomas, Chris, I want to talk about which sectors saw the most green today, and that really was tech and the Mag 7. Why did this tariff pause announcement have such an impact on that sector specifically?
You know, Bridget, I think that was a story that you and I talked about last week on another video. I think that story is going to be different for each Mag 7 stock because you'll notice Microsoft and Google, they didn't get quite the same bounce as others, but Apple, obviously, they're a big winner on this news, even though they've already started talking about shifting some of that iPhone production out of China. This can't help but be big news for Apple, and it was. Again, Meta saw a big surge on this news. NVIDIA did very well today, and I think a lot of the chip sector did well too. It's just really today is the definition of the words relief rally. Like Thomas said, it's a pause, but you know, it's kind of like when the teacher gives you the extension on your homework. We're all kind of procrastinators by nature. It gives the market 90 days to breathe and figure out what's going to go on right now. It gives small businesses a chance to get their inventories aligned. There's just a lot of good news about this announcement, even though there really isn't the overall clarity that everybody would like.
All right. It's another full quarter of activity without tariff impact.
Absolutely.
So instead of us falling off the cliff to the tariff cliff this quarter, it might happen next quarter or maybe not at all.
Right.
And if it does actually happen, it won't be as bad because, again, we're moved past that peak of tariff fear and into this tariff endgame.
Yep.
Well, thank you to everybody who's tuned in to watch this live stream with us today. We love to see the comments rolling in. Nathan, glad that you saw the NVIDIA jump with your portfolio today too. Do you think it still has room to grow up is his question for both you and Thomas and Chris. Do you think NVIDIA has more room to run? I know we're a couple weeks away from NVIDIA's earnings report. We know that that's going to be a big impact. It always is, one way or the other. Do you think that this jump is good news long-term for NVIDIA?
Oh, it is for sure. And we've talked about this in a couple of different videos. NVIDIA is really deeply undervalued relative to its long-term outlook. What this is doing is not only reassuring the market for today, but it's removing that headwind. So we can expect to see analysts stop lowering targets, their sentiment stop being dampened by the tariff impact, and potentially start lifting again if we see some more progress being made and signs that NVIDIA will have less restricted business in China and globally. And so if the analysts start lifting NVIDIA's targets, then the rally will really be on for it and for the broad market. But I think I need to go back and look, but I think that right now the consensus is like 35-45% for NVIDIA, which is a pretty robust upside. And all we really need is to have something happen like something like today, which is just some positive news to get the bulls back in charge.
Yeah, it's a really good point on what's happening with NVIDIA and really the broader market. I think I want to talk about that broader market, the economy right now, all of these things. Like we said, we have some assurance, some assurity of what's going to happen for the next 90 days, and that's helped to calm things down. But the market had been in recovery mode the last couple of weeks, where the S&P 500 had gained back a lot of the losses that it had in early April. There's been so many big market moves. I think everyone's question is this move up that we saw today here to stay, or is this just temporary and we're going to move down or up again with the next announcement that comes out? What are your thoughts on how staying this big jump we saw today could be?
I think that I think it could last for quite some time, but it really just depends on the forward news with the trade, the tariffs and trade. But I want to bring up that last year when we saw Trump coming into office and the possibility for some shifting economics, we were talking about sector rotation, right? And that sector rotation was kind of off the table over the last couple of months because we've had all these tariff headwinds and macroeconomic headwinds. But now with these headwinds easing, and we can think forwards again towards Trump policies potentially boosting domestic production, domestic activity, the idea of sector rotation comes back into play. You've already mentioned that today's rally was pretty broad. I think that's a pretty good sign of that sector rotation is still active, still in play, that investors aren't just buying NVIDIA and the other Mag 7s, but they're also buying a broader array of stocks of also different market cap sizes as well.
Just a couple of other things, Bridget. First of all, I think one of the things I would say today is if you're a retail investor and you held on after, Liberation Day in early April, you were a big winner because a lot of the sentiment around that early April timeframe was just hold on, just do nothing, and you're going to actually wind up being okay on the other end. And this happened a lot faster than probably a lot of people were thinking. But here we are, and for a lot of people, their portfolios were already starting to make back those gains. And today, I would bet you a lot of people's portfolios are looking a lot closer to where they were in early, before April 2nd than they were immediately after that. And second, and this goes to what Thomas was just saying, again, this is kind of a celebration of the retail investor too, because institutions took a lot of money out of the market right after that announcement on April 2nd. And this is the time when they kind of have to place their bets now. Are they going to be betting that are they going to try to short this rally, or are they going to have to start putting money into the rally? I think that's going to be the story over the next few days to see whether or not this rally really has legs.
That's really interesting.
I was thinking about something else. This market rally could turn into a very, very strong melt up for another reason, because with the tariffs being reduced, it's also going to reduce the threat of inflation.
Yep.
Tomorrow we've got a big CPI report coming out. If it shows inflation cooling, it's going to bring Fed rate cuts back to the forefront. If we get the Fed cutting rates at the same time that the tariff fears are being reduced, we're going to have economic outlook rocket higher, earnings outlook rocket higher, and that's going to boost the S&P 500.
Yeah, that was one of the questions our viewers had, and that was our plan to talk about too, is that CPI report tomorrow. We already saw a big jump on Monday. Is there any chance, what would have to come out in CPI tomorrow that could send the market moving even higher tomorrow?
I think just affirming that inflation is coming down, but if it showed a cooler than expected read and really kind of told the market inflation is tracking towards that 2% target, inflation is giving the Fed room to make those cuts, I think that it would really improve market sentiment and it could really accelerate the rally.
Yeah, right now, because of this 90-day situation, Bridget, like Thomas was saying earlier, it assures the market that economic activity is going to be relatively normal for this quarter. And that has some analysts thinking, okay, that's going to fuel inflation higher over the next few months. So I think tomorrow's number is important that it come in at least as expected, because if it comes in a little hotter than expected and then we get maybe hot, then that's going to be signaling we're probably going to be getting hotter inflation over the next couple of quarters or over the next couple of months. That could be a little dicey, but I think as long as the number comes in as expected or slightly lower, I think that's exactly what the market wants to hear right now.
Yeah, very good. Well, a lot of our commenters are asking about stocks we have on our outline to talk about today. And I want to get right to those companies that our viewers, you guys, thank you so much for watching today and for subscribing to Market Beat. We really appreciate everyone who subscribes to this channel and follows along to all of the content me and these two and our other guests have on this channel. So thank you to our subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button and join us for all of our content here. Let's dive right into those stocks that our viewers want to hear about. And the first one we've heard just in the comments today, I've heard this over the weekend too. People want to know what's going on with Lilly. I didn't see the same boost today that some other stocks in the market saw. How did they do during earnings season? Just kind of your overview on what's going on with Eli Lilly.
Well, one of the reasons why they didn't go up today for sure, or I don't know where they closed, but was because of the other announcement that came out from the Trump administration, which was the fact that they're going to be pushing to have the U.S. have favored nation status when it comes to prescription drugs. And that means that drugs like Mounjaro could potentially become less expensive for U.S. consumers to buy. Great for consumers, not so great news for a company like Eli Lilly. And it's the stock's been going up and down. It went down after it missed on earnings a little bit, but it was heading up because there was a study that said Mounjaro was doing better than Wegovy. So there's a lot of stuff happening with the stock, but I think immediately today it was just the fact that there's the potential that they're not going to be able to get the profit on a drug like Mounjaro that they've been getting.
Well, yeah, right. So what I was reading, and this is headlines from the Trump administration, so it's pretty ephemeral, but saying that they weren't targeting the drug makers' profits necessarily, and that they were more targeting the system and the middlemen, and so that the implication was that the drug makers' profits were not going to be hurt, which is why I think that today they didn't sell off like they could have sold off. But also, this company has had some fairly positive news cycles, and I think they've had some pipeline advancements with one of their new drugs that's doing pretty well as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year was a really good year for Lilly. I think the GLP-1s had to do with that too. If I'm not wrong, I think that was part of their big boost in 2024. So the investors in this company have seen quite a few moves. Do you expect any more moves coming yet this year or even into the next quarter?
I think a lot that's going to have to do with what Thomas was just saying about their pipeline. I mean, the GLP-1 market, I'm not going to say it's tapped. It's still going to be growing, but I think the real market's going to be what they do with their pipeline, and they're a company that's got a deep pipeline.
Right, because it looks like Lilly's revenue growth has peaked. It's still growing, like Chris said, but it's quit accelerating. The next quarter, we're expecting a solid quarter, but a deceleration from the high 40% to the 30% range. So with deceleration in play, they're going to need to have a positive pipeline advancement, something else to come to market to help juice that revenue growth to get the market really moving again.
Perfect. Well, we're going to move on to some other stocks that our viewers want to see. SoundHound is one of them, but we're going to get to that sector in a little bit. First, I'm going to move to the retail sector, and we'll start with the big one that saw some really big moves today, and that's Amazon. They saw one of the highest jumps with today's tariff announcement, and it does make sense for this company, but it's also interesting to see the boost for Amazon after earnings last week. I think it was just last week, where they didn't necessarily get a boost. They were in the red for a little bit. Who wants to take that one right away?
Oh, sure, I can help. Well, go ahead, Thomas. No, go ahead.
Live fun. Chris, you go ahead and give us your answer, your thoughts on Amazon.
Oh, no, I was going to say Thomas gets to go ahead and take it because I think we're probably going to.
Oh, no, just Amazon after the earnings report
Amazon,
kind of like
the stock
put in a little bit of a bottom.
Probably dipped a little bit after earnings, but their cloud growth was strong. The news today is is going to be hitting their e-commerce business, and it makes people think that, okay, we're going to be seeing a surge in that. One thing that I think is interesting, and it's interesting to me because Amazon held their gains today. They were up about 7.8% today at the close. But one thing that we do know in the current 90-day pause is that de minimis rule is still there. And that means that some of that lower priced merchandise coming out of China is still going to be subject to tariffs. And that could be impacting Amazon. And maybe that's something that investors haven't quite priced in yet. Or maybe they just felt that Amazon was way undervalued and they're driving the stock price up. But that's something that I would be watching for.
Yeah, Thomas, what are your thoughts on Amazon, especially if you looked at their earnings last week? Did they have any misses in earnings or any fears that were sparking some of the reaction we saw post earnings for Amazon last week? I think we might have some delay problems going on with our broadcast today. Thomas, can you hear us anymore? Well, we might have lost Thomas' mic on this one. Well, let's move on from Amazon, talking about another retail giant. Hopefully, Thomas, you can chime in when you can hear us here. But we're talking about Walmart too. There's a lot of movement happening with Walmart. And Chris, what are your thoughts on Walmart?
You know, Walmart was one of the ones that it shot pretty high when the market first opened. I see it closed down a little bit. You know, Walmart's just one of those stocks that's going to be what it's going to be, but it does look a little expensive to me right now. It's trading at around 37 times
see anything
earnings.
That jumped out at me.
I mean, it's worth a premium, that's for sure, but that seems like a pretty generous premium for
I think
Walmart.
that the rebound
I would be a little concerned about that, but again, the stock's going to do what it's going to do.
Can you guys hear me?
I don't have any question that the company's going to probably report very good numbers, but it's just, it does look a little pricey to me.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, I think we are having some pretty major delays with our communication back and forth between Thomas here. So we're going to have Thomas maybe jump off and then try to get back on in a minute because there's some major delays happening. Sorry, guys. Thanks for sticking with us through this live broadcast as we're figuring out some of these technical things of how to make this work. But it's still a really good discussion. We've got a lot of good stocks we're going to get to today. So we're going to try to get Thomas back on in a minute. Chris, thank you for your analysis of what's going on in Walmart. I hope our viewers were able to hear that okay. We're going to go on to another one that's reporting today. A couple of our viewers over the weekend were asking about Simon Properties and Dillard's as well. These are stocks and companies that have been around for a really long time, and they speak a lot to what's happening with consumers in like the true retail space, those brick and mortar stores,
right.
What's happening in retail. So Chris, give us a little analysis on what's going on with those companies.
Well, okay, so yeah, we're going live, but I was counting on Thomas to give me a lifeline here with Simon. So Simon Properties is a REIT.
Yes, we can hear you now, Thomas. Yeah.
Can you? Is he back? Okay. Well, Simon Properties is a real estate investment trust, a REIT, and what they specialize in is just exactly what you were saying. They specialize in a lot of those mall properties, the malls themselves, the strip malls, and things like that. And the stock's been going up over the last month as there's probably been expectations of news that we like, such as this news that we got today. Plus, Simon's a very good dividend player, as all REITs are. So a lot of investors are thinking it was probably a safe place to hang out. While the market was being volatile, Simon was a good place to hang out. So now I think investors are benefiting from both. They could see some stock price appreciation from here, and they're still getting that dividend. Dillard's is a little bit trickier to understand, Bridget. The stock was up today, and I think there's no question why it was up today, and that's the news of the tariffs. But it's been a stock that's been it's not, let's just say this, analysts don't really favor the stock right now, and that's because it's showing shrinking same store sales. Revenue's been declining. There's just its operating margin has been going down. So I think today's jump in Dillard's is really just because of a kind of a relief of what's been going on in the broader market. But as far as the stock itself, I'm not sure I'm really on board with that as far as recommending it or anything like that.
All right, good analysis of what's going on in those companies for now too. We'll get back to retail when we can get Thomas back on for sure here. Let's go to from retail. We wanted to talk about the financial sector a little bit. Any moves in the financial sector today? We had a couple of questions over the weekend specifically about FULT and B. Riley. These are kind of smaller companies that saw quite a bit of a dip. I don't know if you want to talk about those companies specifically to answer one of our viewer questions, or just about the financial sector, insurance as a whole. Anything happening in that sector, Chris?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not that familiar with Folt, so I would probably rather just pass on that one. And let's see, B. Riley.
It's a smaller company.
Yeah.
Again, quite a few moves down for this company recently. I don't know if any of our viewers who are watching right now have heard about that company or have looked into it. I know overall, finance was doing pretty well as a sector, especially insurance for a little while there when the rest of the market was dropping. They were holding on pretty strong. As for these two companies specifically, they're pretty small. They're not something we've had a lot of investors interested in. So, Chris, if you have any other thoughts on those, you can share. Otherwise, we can move on to the next ones too. We love to hear what you're interested in. That's why I love to read your comments and hear which stocks you want to learn more about. You got to give us a little time to get into it, but we will get into it for everyone.
Yeah, again, I think with B. Riley as well as with Folt, they both seem like they're I can see why investors would be interested in them because they both have really nice dividend yields, but again, I'll confess to not being that familiar with either stock, and without knowing exactly what I'm looking at here, I'd be concerned about making a statement one way or the other on those.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want you to take this one away for a little bit, and that is talking about quantum computing stocks. Rigetti is going to be reporting very, very soon. We also had some questions from viewers about D-Wave. This is a company that a lot of viewers interested in quantum computing are excited about. D-Wave. Rigetti was a huge stock at the end of last year, early this year. Anything happening with those companies right now?
Well, I don't know if there's anything that's new that's happening with those companies, Bridget, but I mean, I think it's interesting that these are two companies that our viewers are interested in, because Rigetti is seen largely as the gold standard when it comes to quantum stocks. If you're going to be investing in quantum computing, Rigetti is the one you want to be in. And I don't see there's any reason why that won't still be the case. They report, I think they actually reported today. They did.
Yes.
They missed on earnings, but it looks like they came in okay on revenue. Analysts like the stock. It's got about 25% upside. I think something to keep in mind here is that, with most of these quantum computing stocks, these are companies that aren't profitable yet. And Rigetti showed that again this morning, not profitable yet. But again, Rigetti's kind of considered the gold standard in this area. D-Wave is sort of an interesting competitor because of the way they're approaching quantum technology with their annealing technology. But again, the story there is not profitable yet. They're going to have to show a path to profitability. And, so we'll see. It's very interesting because these are two very different ways of approaching the sector.
Yeah, they are very different companies, but they have investors excited for different reasons. I want you to talk about quantum computing as a whole really quick, Chris, just to talk about, do you expect to see any more big moves in quantum computing this year already? Or do you think any major gains that either Rigetti, D-Wave, IonQ, another quantum computing stock out there could see big moves coming yet in 2025?
Boy, my guess is no. The technology is real. The technology is still, I think, several years away from being something that is going to really fire up investors. However, having said that, if this rally starts to have legs and we start seeing an end to all of these troubles, the tariff troubles, if the tax things line up well, it could be something where these stocks take on a life of their own. But they are speculative stocks still in their current state, because again, most of these companies are not profitable yet and they're not generating a ton of revenue.
Yeah. Let's see if Thomas is back.
I think you're back. I can hear you.
I can hear Thomas. I'm hoping
I can hear you, Thomas. Hey, I think you're
I'm
back.
hoping,
Hey, there we go. Yeah.
I can see you. I can hear you. Let's see if this is going strong for our viewers. I sure hope it is. Thomas, I think we're ready to get to one of your favorite companies out there in the AI sector, and that is SoundHound. Let's jump it right into what SoundHound is doing. It saw quite a run up today.
At face value, the report wasn't that awesome, kind of tepid relative to the analysts' expectations. But some of the big takeaways are that revenue growth accelerated to 151%. They reaffirmed guidance. They're still tracking to make profits within the next couple of years. They announced a lot of new clients, expanded businesses. And I think another big takeaway is that what was in the report was enough to cause some short covering. And I think what we're seeing is the start of a short covering rally. The short interest in this stock had gone up above 40% at the end of last year. It's been coming down since then, still very high, above 30% at the last report. And I just think that what I'm seeing in the chart and what I'm seeing in this report are just reasons for the shorts to get back out of the market. One of those things has to do with dilution and the outlook for profitability. Last year, the company leaned heavily into some diluted efforts to maintain the cash and the fortress balance sheet. It still has no debt. Its share count is up significantly. But again, with that outlook for profitability, it looks like the company won't have to raise any more capital or very much capital to get across that finish line. And so again, short interest is starting to exit the market. We've got a nice short covering rally starting. I think it closed up like 20-25% today.
Yeah, that's big news for this company.
Yeah.
It had a really rough year where we saw that big drop, lost about half of its value, maybe a little bit more. But there was so much momentum this year. Lots of people excited about the potential of a partnership with McDonald's. Did anything ever come about with that, Thomas? I know it's been a few months since you and I have talked about this on the show.
I never have heard anything else about that, and they don't always announce by name their clients, because one new client they talked about with this report was a national pizza chain. There's like 3 that it could be, but they didn't say who it was. But that's a huge validation for the business. But they also work with Chipotle Mexican Grill, and they work with Casey's General Stores, other big names with a large regional or a national footprint. Lots of recognition, validation for the business, recognition for the consumers. So this company it's gaining momentum, gaining traction. And I think all of it just plays back into that high short interest and the beginnings of the short covering rally.
Yeah, I just have to share a quick story. Mother's Day weekend, we went for a hike. We called Casey's to order pizza. We got the SoundHound rep. We got the AI rep answering the phone. So you can see this company showing up just in your daily life in different parts. So it's interesting to see how much SoundHound is expanding. So it will be, again, interesting to see where that company continues to go, because there's clearly a demand for its services. Let us know what you think. Any SoundHound fans out there watching right now who got a little boost in their stock. I think some might have sold off when we were at that high and it started to drop a little bit. Are you adding to your position right now, Thomas? Is this a company, while it is a little bit down still from its highs, is now a time to add SoundHound?
It does look like now would be a good time to start considering it at the very least. I would be looking for some pretty critical levels. Right now, the critical resistance is near 1180, 1185. So if the market can get above that level, I see a move to 14 coming pretty quickly. Then once we get above 14, up to 18 is possible. So I think that this is a rally that will probably unfold in stages over the next couple of quarters as the company releases its results, and those results are improving and show the path towards profitability.
Very good. Well, I want to stick in the AI realm a little bit and talk about one of our viewers wants to hear a little bit more about Google. They did really well today, Chris. What about Google had it doing well, especially in a day like today with tariff announcements? How does that coincide with what Google's doing? And just overall, Google's had a really good last 7 days with its earnings report too.
Yeah, Google ended up about 3% today. Bridget, I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know where it started. I think it might have started higher than that, but it settled down but it was up about 3% for the day. Google's a stock with a lot of noise around it right now. It's just there's concerns about Apple and the street and how search is going to be done. Is Apple going to pull that away from Safari and different things? You know, Google, there are other better plays for me in the Mag 7 right now, but Google does seem undervalued, especially if you put value in a lot of the other areas that they seem to be growing in, like autonomous vehicles. They're going to be playing in that area and other things. But again, the core search business is under pressure. Being under pressure with the type of market share they have might be a relative term, but it also may make the stock a little bit less attractive.
Thomas, anything you want to add on Google?
The Google chart looks a lot like Amazon does to me. It's the market's corrected, but it's hit a bottom. The results and now this news with the tariffs is kind of reaffirming the fact that the outlook isn't as bad as the fears had assumed. So the market's hit a bottom, we're gaining some traction, and I think that we're moving towards a rally. If not this quarter, then as the year progresses.
Very good. Well, I want to move on to another area that is really interesting right now. They're both going to be reporting very soon, and that is the air taxis. We've talked about that on this channel for a while. Lots of our viewers interested in Joby and Archer Aviation, so I'd love to have you guys talk about those two. But I know Blade is another air taxi potential competitor that's also reporting right now. Chris, why don't you start us off with that air taxi conversation? How are these companies doing, and will this become a reality soon?
Yeah, Blade's interesting because they're in what's called the air mobility arena, but they're not really an air taxi. They do other things like helicopters and other things. And one of the things about Blade is they're already a company that's generating revenue, and they reported actually this morning, came in, I think, light on revenue, but they beat on or light on earnings, but they beat on revenue. So they're an interesting player in the space because, again, they're not really the air taxis in the same way that Archer and Joby are. So that's interesting. To your other question, I think with Archer and Joby, it's becoming inevitable. I mean, they've gone through the process. They've gone through the FAA certification. They're in the manufacturing stage right now. Archer's already signed up with a company like Palantir to optimize how they're going to scale up their manufacturing. So I think this is really just a question of it's no longer a question of if, it's a question of when these companies are going to really start commercializing their products. They've got partnerships lined up with major airlines. So, I think this is pretty inevitable. And with all the things you're hearing about going on with air traffic control and slowdowns at our major airports, I think this is just it's a bullish time for those stocks.
Right.
Yeah, Thomas, I don't know if we've ever done a video on air taxis. What are your thoughts on Archer and Joby especially? And before you answer, Thomas, Chris, I want to give you a little time. I want to move to the next stock. I want to give you time to look it up while
Sure.
Thomas is giving his answer. One of our viewers wants to know about HIMSS and dive into pharmaceutical companies a little more. I know we've talked about it before, so you look up that one. And then Thomas, why don't you share your Joby and Archer kind of analysis too?
Well, right. As the son of an Army aviator, I think the eVTOL stocks are pretty cool. I think they're pretty cool. I lean more towards Joby. I'm more up to speed with them. But like Chris was saying, the reality of these air taxi services is happening now. Both of their vehicles have been proven. They're both moving through the FAA certification process. We're expecting final certification for both this year, I think. They're both working on partnerships. Joby is working on a heliport right now in the UAE, so they're going to be live there pretty soon. I think that we're looking for commercial operations by the end of this year, early next year. So these companies will start making significant revenue by then, and then it's just a matter of time getting it ramped up. We're looking at production's already started. They're ramping production. Lots of investment dollars are behind them. So yeah, it's happening now. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I know a lot of our viewers very interested in those stocks. If you're not in them yet, check out one of them. Some people are choosing one, either Joby or Archer, and some are just kind of doing a little bit in both, just investing in the industry as a whole. I'm sure there's ETFs out there that are following the air taxi movement too. So lots of ways to invest in that area if you are excited about the future of that new kind of development happening out there. All right, we've got just a few minutes left of our broadcast, so I'm going to cover a few more stocks that people are interested in hearing about. One of them was Hims. Thank you for that comment, and thank you for watching. Chris, go ahead and take us into what's happening with Hims recently. What have they been up to?
Well, it's interesting that you gave me this stock, Bridget, because this stock, I haven't followed it very closely until somewhat recently, but this is a stock that kind of has a similar story to Palantir, but in a different space. No question, when you look at the forward price to earnings on this stock, it's you're paying a premium for it right now, but it's up over 300% in the last year. There's a lot of people that would want to lump this stock up and say it's a meme stock, but I always think that that's kind of a pejorative term that it doesn't deserve. I reserve that for stocks like GameStop that actually deserve that. This is a real business and it's really growing. I think you're going to possibly see some choppiness here in the short term because, again, I think it does have to grow into its valuation. But I think there's a really solid story here. Management's been doing a really good job of executing on their business model. They just did a partnership with Novo Nordisk with Wegovy. So there's a lot to like here with the stock. It may get a little choppy here, but I think but I've said the same thing about Palantir recently. Eventually, valuation will probably matter, but at the same time, this stock has been growing. It's got a really solid business model. It's one to watch. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, very good. Well, guys, thank you so much for going into all of these stocks. We covered a lot of ground today. I think I want to end this with just one last look at what's coming up the rest of this week. What are the two of you? Thomas, you can start. Chris, I want to hear your answer too right after Thomas. What are you guys planning for or preparing for this week as far as market moves? Monday was kind of an unexpected good news for the market. What do you expect the rest of the week, Thomas?
Well, I think that the two big events I'm looking at right now are tomorrow's CPI report and then Walmart's earnings on Thursday. Walmart is the leading largest retailer. It's been outperforming the sector, been taking share. We're going to want to see them continue to report strongly and give good guidance. Otherwise, it could cast a shadow of doubt on the forward outlook. But with the new tariff developments, I would expect that to materialize somewhere, if not in their results, then in the guidance and the commentary, just relieving some fears and some uncertainty about what the future will bring. And then again, that relief of uncertainty is really all that we need for the market to continue moving higher.
Right. Yeah, I'll take a little different tack from Thomas. The CPI will be certainly important tomorrow. The one I tend to look for more is the PPI, which will be coming out on Thursday, because generally, whatever you see in the PPI this month, you're going to see in the CPI next month. And so I'm going to be kind of looking where producer prices are, see what that number looks like, because I think that will give us the expectation for what CPI might look like down the road. I agree with Thomas. Walmart's going to be a very interesting earnings report coming up. And again, I think I just want to see now what happens the day after the trade announcement. What happens now? What happens in the next few days? What do the institutions do? Are they going to step on the gas, or are they going to decide, hey, maybe we're going to try to take some profits off the table? I think that'll be really interesting.
Well, right. So I think the CPI and Walmart will both play into what Chris just said. I think the market is set up to continue moving higher. Yep. Today was a step higher. Early in the day, it seemed like it was going to be a small, tight trading range, but we did advance later in the day and close with a green candle. That's a very good sign. The market was buying into the close. I think tomorrow is, if we get a good CPI report that doesn't raise any fears, the market will continue to move higher.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to walk us through the rest of this week and what's happening in the market today. Thank you, viewers, for joining us today. And thanks for sticking with us through technical difficulties and all the fun we had today. We really appreciate you watching. And we're going to continue doing this on Mondays at Market Close. So we hope you'll join us again as we perfect our live streams here at Market Beat. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. And as always, happy investing.